Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual presentation of New in Town with author-illustrator Kevin Cornell. We have signed book plates available for those who purchase a copy of today's featured book. To request one, just write signed book plate in the order comments when you are checking out your cart on our website. Any bit of support goes a very long way, so we appreciate anybody who puts in an order for New in Town today. Also, if you have any questions for Kevin, whether it's craft questions or just, I guess, like random personal questions, feel free to send them in through the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you'd like. They'll make their way to the very top of the list. All right, so before we get started, let me briefly introduce Kevin and then we can get started. So, Kevin Cornell is the author and illustrator of Lucy Fell Down the Mountain. He is known for his humor and has illustrated many books, websites, and comics such as The Chicken Squad, Count the Monkeys, The Terrible Two, and Mustache. He spends his time in Philadelphia drawing made up things, and he will be drawing some of those made up things later today. So, with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off and hand things over to Kevin.
Thank you, Rira. Okay, I'm going to tell everyone a story. All right. So this is a story called New in Town that I started about 12 years ago. And I am so excited to tell this story to you because I've been working on it for so long. And I thought that a good way to share this story would be in a dramatic reading, which I will do for you right now. So, here we go. One fine morning, the people of Puddle Trunk woke to find their bridge had collapsed. Again. Over the years, they'd lost many a bridge. Termites, sad to say, had destroyed them all. Luckily, Puddle Trunk could always build another, thanks to the bridge building expertise of local resident, the fabulous Mortimer Gulch. Drat, said Mr. Gulch, studying the bridge's remains. Termites again? Don't they know how expensive bridges are to build? If termites did not, the people of Puddle Trunk surely did. Fortunately, Mr. Gulch was willing to accept jewelry and cash, and even dip into the clock tower repair jar to fund his rebuild. Everyone was happy to donate, except the traveling clock repairman. Come now, little fellow, urged Mr. Gulch. Everyone else donates. Then my donation, replied the repairman, will be to fix your clock tower free of charge. This Mr. Gulch accepted with only minor complaint. The repairman was new in town after all, and did not know how things worked. And so construction began on Puddle Trunk Bridge number 272. Everything went especially fabulous. Mr. Gulch was an awe-inspiring orator, a master of motivational rhetoric, a legend in the annals of emergency bridge building. And the bridge was quite good too. Until, that is, the wood ran out. Thankfully, the resourceful Mr. Gulch did not lose heart. The new fellow has plenty of wood, mused Mr. Gulch. I shall borrow some of his. He paid call upon the repairman that very night. New fellow, said Mr. Gulch, looking about the cluttered hotel room. Might you lend us a smidgen of your wood? Well, I'd rather not, the repairman replied. I don't want it eaten by termites. My dear boy, said Mr. Gulch, I am a termite expert, and I assure you it will be safe in our bridge. And I'm quite sure, replied the repairman, it will be safer in my tower. Mr. Gulch thought this reply quite ignorant. Towers, in fact, were just as delicious as bridges, perhaps even more so. Why, only a small amount of chewing could easily cause an entire tower to fall, crushing a half finished bridge and waking an entire town with its ruckus. And that, just as Mr. Gulch predicted, is exactly what happened. Luckily, he was there to speak words of comfort to the angry townsfolk as they stumbled from their slumber. Good people of Puddletrunk, he exclaimed, let us not be angry with the little fellow. He is new in town, after all, and does not know how things work. I'm sure, by way of apology, he's quite willing to contribute a sizable donation to Puddletrunk Bridge number 273. That, the repairman replied, will be quite unnecessary. You see, Mr. Gulch, I've already built it. And my stars, it was true. The fallen tower now spanned both sides of the chasm and made for a magnificent bridge. So overjoyed were the folk of Puddletrunk that they threw the grandest of grand openings. Everyone enjoyed themselves immensely, except Mr. Gulch, who fretted about how poorly made the bridge was, how he'd never used such a rickety thing, and how genuinely frightened he was to cross it. Nevertheless, he used it that night when he left town forever on urgent business. What a good sport! As for the repairman, well, there was still plenty in Puddletrunk that needed fixing, so he decided to stay. And though he was new in town and did not know how things worked, as far as the folk of Puddletrunk were concerned, that was something truly fabulous. Okay, that was my book, New in Town. And now I hope that we can move from a dramatic reading to sharing a little dramatic drawing with you. All right. I'm just going to walk you through how to draw a scene of great dramatic drama in only 8 steps. Now, you just need a piece of paper and something to draw with for this. So if you have something at hand, run quickly and grab it. I'm going to get my instructions settled here, and then we'll put together a dramatic scene. Here we go. This is my piece of paper. I'm going to be drawing this in the same program that I drew the book in. So here we go. Now, the first thing you need to do if you're going to put together a scene of dramatic drama is to draw some bodies. And I want this scene to be the repairman and Mortimer Gulch. So we're actually going to start right down here, drawing a circle that is going to be the repairman's head. Now, the repairman, his body is also a circle as well. I like to tuck that second circle under the first circle, sort of like that. Now, Mortimer Gulch, he's a lot taller. He's got a bigger head. That goes right about there. Now, his body, I like to make a square. He's got a square body, so see if you can get a square underneath Mortimer Gulch's head like that. There we go. Now, the next important step is going to be eyes, nose, and ears. And I like to start off with a circle for the nose. Helps me know where I'm going. And then I draw in the eyes once I know where the nose is going to be. Now, this is important. Don't draw dots in the eyes yet. We're going to save that for later. And we're going to draw some ears on the repairman at the moment. There we go. And Mortimer Gulch, he's got some different features than the repairman. He's got a long, pointy nose, like so, long, pointy ears, and he has little eyes, almost the same as the repairman's. There we are. Okay, now the next important part of this scene of great dramatic drama is going to be pants. Our characters are going to be wearing some fancy pants. And they've got little cuffs at the bottom, like so, and then little triangles for their feet. Now, Mortimer Goldcheese got longer legs, like so. And he's going to have little cuffs at the bottom of his pants as well. And I like to show a little ankle to Mortimer Gulch. So he's got triangle feet that stick out a little further. And both our characters have pants. Next, I like our characters to have arms and hands. So the repairman has very short arms and very little hands. So when I draw hands, I just draw a lot of spiky things at the end, and that looks like a hand enough for me. Mortimer Gulch, he's got very long arms. So I like to give him these very long tubes. And then I like to draw folded hands. He likes to fold his hands in front of himself, like so. And then we're going to turn this second part into an arm here. And he's folding his hands in front of himself. So we've got hands, legs, faces. Let's move on to the next most important aspect of any scene of great dramatic drama, which is hats. So the repairman's got a hat that just sits on top of his head. It's got a little brim, and then he's got a little beanie on top of that hat, like so. Mortimer Gulch, he likes to wear a bowler hat, like so. I like to color in his bowler hat. There we go. And I think these two characters are very fashionable, and I think the fashion that they wear when they're doing some dramatic things is a bow tie. They always look great in whatever they're doing. So I'm going to draw some bow ties here. And I also would like for these guys to be wearing some vests. So I'm going to do this, and this should make it look like they've got some vests on. Now we have the hats and the bow ties and the vests, but I think they'd look even better if they had some colors and patterns going on. So now's the time to start coloring those clothes in. I like to draw a dark vest on the repairman, and I like to draw dark pants on Mortimer Gulch. There we go. Just coloring in those pants. And I like Mortimer Gulch to have a fancy plaid vest. And this is how I draw plaid. I add a lot of crisscrossing lines, like so. There we go. Now he's in a fancy vest. And you know what? I want the repairman to have a plaid hat. Everyone's wearing plaid today. There we go. Now we've come to the final and most important aspect of a scene of great dramatic drama, and that is the expressions. So now's the time to add in those eyeballs. The repairman and Mortimer Gulch, they're going to be looking at each other. So just a couple dots right there, and now they're looking at each other. And the repairman, he's going to be, he's a pretty happy guy. He's pretty chipper and upbeat, and he's got a lot of positive things to say. He's complimenting Mortimer Gulch's plaid vest. Mortimer Gulch he's not as upbeat. He's actually he's very skeptical of this new fellow in town. And he's got a scowl. So we have some time left for a little bonus. And I think what I'd like to add is the thing that they're both experiencing this scene of dramatic drama around. And that's That's most likely going to be something in the background here. We're going to start to draw it by drawing a triangle, but that triangle is going to have a bite out of it, like so. And now I'm going to ask you to draw just a couple more triangles, or sorry, rectangles. I'm saying triangles. And a couple more rectangles here. And then we're going to draw some lines to divide up our rectangles. And you can start to see these are looking like bricks. And maybe we've started to put together a tower. And if you draw a triangle now on top of this tower and add some lines like so, well, we've got a roof on our tower. And no clock tower can be truly done until it has a clock faces in it. And then some windows so you can look out from inside. So there we go. We've got a perfectly valid scene of great dramatic drama. I hope you followed along and drew a scene of your own. I'm going to hand things back to Rira.
All
There we
right.
go.
Okay, let me turn my camera back on.
Rira, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm at the very bottom of the screen. Hi. Okay, so we have some time for questions. So if you guys have questions to ask Kevin, just use the ask a question box at the very bottom of the screen. And I guess I'll just start off with some general questions that our audience may have, Kevin. So you said that this was a long journey. How long did it take you to write New in Town?
It was probably somewhere in the realm of 12 to 10 years, something like that. It was the very first book when I asked my agent, hey, can I make a book? Because I started out as an illustrator, not a writer in any way. And he said, yeah, send something my way. So I sent him something that was so long that you could never turn it into a picture book. It would be like 5 picture books. And so I never gave up on it. I kept working on over and over, just trying to get a smaller story, something that was more manageable and could fit on 40 pages. And it took a long time to get there, but eventually I found a point where FSG, wonderful publishers, were willing to tell this story. And so that's how I arrived at New in Town.
I'm curious, as a writer and illustrator, do you write the story in text format, like in a script, or do you do it by thumbnails? Like, how do you plan out your story?
That's a good question. I actually went back and forth between sometimes I would write a little, and sometimes I would take little post-it notes and I'd write like a little, what that page was going to be about. I'd do a little drawing to say like what that drawing was going to be about. And I'd try and build my story just with post-it notes. Like I'd start very small and with as few words as I could, because that's the hardest part about making a picture book, is that you have to use very few words, but they have to say a lot. They have to carry a lot of weight, and it takes a while to do that. It's very difficult to say something simply. It's easier to say something in lots and lots of words, and it takes a lot of work to say something that seems simple.
Yeah, it sounds really tricky, especially like drawing the emotions of the characters. Other than the emotions, was there any other tricky parts in drawing your characters or the settings for New in Town?
Let's see, the trickiest parts were when you get to a certain point and you're so far into the story and the drawings are very detailed, you have to decide when something is too detailed and it's distracting from the story. And so uh, every now and then I'd reach a moment where I'd be like, is there too much drawing going on in this story? Am I making things harder to understand? And I'd have to be very brave and sometimes taking a lot of work than I'd done and just saying, all right, I'm going to throw that out and I'm going to walk things back, because that's something that every now and then you have to do when you're making anything, any creative thing, is sometimes you have to just trash things and start over. You don't get everything right the first time. And sometimes there's mistakes that you make, and they're not expected, but they're good mistakes and they help you out. So every now and then something unexpected happens. You have to be like, is this actually going to help the story or not? It happened a lot in Mortimer Gulch. There was some mistakes that just worked out.
Mistakes that turned out to be happy accidents, I see.
Yeah.
What's a memorable one? What's a memorable happy accident in New in Town?
So there's one part where Mortimer Gulch, there's a scene where he's holding out his hat and it's full of money and stuff like that. And I was not able to take that scene and have Mortimer Gulch be leaning down and talking to the repairman and still have the repairman in the scene in the same way that it felt right. So I'd just taken my drawing of the repairman and just moved him to another side. And the repairman on the other side, it looked better to just have like a little tiny repairman just sitting at the other side, just very much dwarfed by Mortimer Gulch. There was, Mortimer Gulch in a busy scene, and then the repairman in a very, you know, not a lot going on, a very calm, lonely scene. And it worked better than what I had originally planned. So I just changed my tack at that point.
Um, so I have to ask, this is a pretty silly question. So you have a repairman in New in Town. Are you pretty handy with repairs? Like, what is the most what is the biggest repair you've had to do on your own?
I am not handy in any way, and I don't do anything beyond just like spackling. And even then, like, I'm not allowed to paint. Like, my wife does all that painting if that has to happen, because I have no patience and no attention to detail. So in this book, the repairman, I don't identify with him that closely. Mortimer Gulch, I identify with well. I'm like, oh, I understand that really selfish guy. That's a guy I'm familiar with. Yeah.
um, but you've probably been new in town before, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
can you share an experience where you've kind of really felt, I guess, like out of your depth, but kind of how did you overcome that? Like, how did you make being new in town less scary for our young viewers out there?
This is a question I didn't expect, but I'm so glad it came up, because when I was a kid, I moved around a lot. And it wasn't until maybe I was about 9 or 10 where we moved to the place where I would finally, that would be my home for several years. And so I was always making new friends and stuff like that. And like, it was hard at first, but, every now and then, if I stayed, very, if I tried not to be to myself and I tried to talk to people and I didn't necessarily hide too much and took the very scary risk of um, just talking to someone new, or just trying to make a new friend, um, more often than not, that ended up with me meeting someone new. We're all the same. We all pretty much are very scared about meeting new people. And we want to stay in our comfort zone of just being with the people we know, being with our parents, being with our brothers and sisters. And you always are going to have to swallow your fears and take a little step forward and do something you're not comfortable with if you want your life to get any better. It can't get any better if you stay scared and only stay in your comfort zone. And so that's something that's very hard for me to do, but I've tried to do it all my life, and I think it's worked out for the best.
So I love the designs in your characters, and I know that you've drawn like other like monster-like creatures and animals for your other works. So my question is, do you have like a favorite animal or creature you'd like to draw, and what's your least favorite, or I guess like the most difficult one for you to draw?
Um, I drawing animals was really hard for me. The animal that I love to draw the most is a human being. And so I when I first got into kids books, I was drawing for Dorian Cronin for Chicken Squad. I was drawing chickens and I was drawing dogs, and those were really fun. But I was so excited to draw human beings, and so dogs were very tough for me. Anything that has four legs, and their legs don't bend quite the way a human's legs bend, and they don't end in the same way that a human's, feet and hands end. I I had a long period of learning before I could draw like a dog correctly. But even today, I still, if I have to draw a horse, that is a lot of work. But that being said, if I have to draw a car is harder for me than a horse. I will do anything to avoid drawing a car.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I never thought a car would be, I guess, a creature that would be a nightmare for artists to draw.
There's people who love them and who are amazing at them, and I tip my hat to them because I've
So your
struggled.
next book is not going to be about cars.
If it is about cars, it'll take me about 20 years to make it.
Oh goodness. Okay, so we have a question from Izzy. How did you come with the name Mortimer?
Oh, I had thought of different names for the Repairman character for a very long time, but the name Mortimer Gulch came to me almost immediately for this particular character, and it was just one of those things where when you draw, when you're drawing a character, like sometimes for me, the first thing that happens is like a name pops into my head, and that's how I know. That's how I start to connect with that character. And that's almost exactly what happened with Mortimer Gulch. The name Mortimer first before Gulch. But yeah, that was my experience. It's one of those things that was just given to me, a very lucky break.
Yeah, it's a great name. It just sticks right into your brain, and you can just picture the character before you even open the book.
Yeah.
I love it. So what is the funniest visual gag or joke you've written in your creations?
Okay. That is it's funny it ties into the horses because I think the best joke I ever wrote, ever like a comic that I wrote was it was a horse and he was standing there and the caption underneath was the hardest thing to draw about horses is the hands. And instead of hoofs, I had drawn hands.
Oh,
That's a solid joke. I'm pretty
that
proud
yeah,
of that.
that is pretty solid. I will give you that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So, like, were you always interested in drawing when you were younger, or is this something that, is this passion something that developed later when you were an adult?
I I drew from the moment I was a kid pretty much on. So I sometimes say I'm 44 now and I can say like I've drawn for like at least 40 years. Um, and that's as much time as you need as I needed to like get the amount of practice I needed to be to be drawing at the level I'm at now. Yeah, there was some brief periods where I stopped and I learned some other, trades that I could use to get a job. But yeah, drawing has been something I've done since I was a kid. I've always loved it. That's what kept me drawing, is I was always drawing things that I enjoyed drawing, things that were fun for me. It didn't matter if anyone didn't like what I was drawing. I liked what I was doing. And so I was just naturally practicing for years and years and years without realizing it.
Yeah, I think for most kids, like, you enjoy drawing. Like, you don't think about whether you're good at it or you're bad at it. You just like what you like. And as you get older, I think people become more self-conscious and they lose that desire to keep drawing. Um, So yeah, I always love asking authors and illustrators, like, oh, were you always a writer? Were you always a drawer? Is this something that came up later in life? Because if it did came up later in life, it means that that passion had resurged somehow, because everybody starts from somewhere.
Mhm.
That's lovely to hear that you stuck to it all these years. What advice would you give to kids who would like to become artists themselves one day?
I so I have two or three pieces of advice that I think can help anyone. Um, and the first one would be, so like I said, you draw what you find fun. You if you like drawing like castles and zebras, then you just draw as many as them as you want, and you just keep trying to do it better and better every time. You get the hang of breaking what you want to draw into shapes, like in the same way I'd put together that scene with the Repairman and the Mortimer Gulch, and I'd made it out of shapes. You just want to start figuring out how to put together those things that you like to draw uh, out of shapes. And then you start to realize that those same shapes can be used to make other things you haven't drawn before, but you might be able to do a good job at drawing. So if you learn to draw a horse, maybe the next thing you learn to draw is a zebra or a gazelle or like an elephant or something like that. And just expand your library of things you can draw outwards from there. So that's the first piece of advice I would always offer. And the second piece of advice would be you don't want to, there's lots of people out there who can draw amazing things, and you might enjoy seeing those amazing things. And you're welcome to enjoy seeing the other things that people draw. But when it comes to drawing, um, you want to only compare yourself to yourself. You don't want you want to be you want to draw something and say like I'm going to do a better job than I did on a previous drawing. And that's how you get a little better, but you don't necessarily, you can get upset sometimes if you're looking at someone who's really good and you're like I'm not as good at that person, and it might make you want to quit. And that's a shame because you have something uh, in yourself that you have yet to discover. And drawing in a way that you're only comparing to yourself lets you discover it without being derailed by how good someone else is. And the third point that I would point out, it goes along with discovery. And drawing for me has always been an act of discovery where I'm figuring things out when I draw. I don't know how a water wheel works, so I try and draw a water wheel. And then as I'm drawing it, I run into all kinds of situations where I'm like, well, what would be this part that goes here? What makes it turn? Where does the water come in? Drawing is a process of exploring the world. And as long as there's always something to discover on the other end, as long as there's that mystery, it usually keeps you drawing step by step by step. And you don't notice that an hour has gone by as you're trying to figure out like what's inside a camera, or you're trying to figure out like what's on top of a telephone pole. You always want to try and use that moment when you're drawing to discover something new. And sometimes that means not using reference, and sometimes that means like maybe looking at like a little something to help you out.
I think
So that's the advice I would give.
those are some pretty solid advice. To the people who are watching this and who want to be artists, like take notes. Like I feel like they will help you a long way. You showed us your software that you use for your drawing for this book. Do you use any other tools? Like, are you someone who starts off drawing digitally right off the bat?
I used to always start traditionally. I'd start on a piece of paper in real life with, I'd work in a sketchbook. And Mortimer Gulch actually started, or New in Town started out like that. I was working in a sketchbook and working on paper. Um, and that's just a lot of that was because that's where I was most comfortable starting. And ideas came the easiest that way and trying new things. And the stakes were very low. If I was drawing on a piece of paper, if I didn't like it, I'd just crumple it up and throw it out. Um, but for the most part nowadays, I actually do most of my work digitally. Like I'll work in a program called Procreate on my iPad, and then I eventually transition over to Photoshop in order to do much larger drawings, um, and add text and all kinds of other things that, make it more like a book. Uh, yeah.
Interesting. Do you listen to music while you work? Like, was there a background soundtrack, I guess, while you were working on New in Town?
I so I tend to work. Drawing is a lot of hours, and I might spend 8 hours just standing here drawing. And so sometimes I put on television shows to listen to in the background, but other times I'll have music on. But this is the thing that's going to make me sound super crazy. But oftentimes, what I'll do, because when you're drawing, it's almost like meditating. You're trying to get into a very small, closed mental space, and you're just staying in that space and just working out in that space. Sometimes I'll pick one song that is the song that best represents what it is I'm working on. And I'll listen to that song on repeat. And so there might be one single song on repeat in this room for 8 hours. And it would drive anyone else nuts, but I don't notice it because I'm in flow. I'm in that special space where I can draw.
Do you remember which song you played for 8 hours for this book?
I I do remember, but I'm not going to say.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
secret
It's
song.
it's a secret song. Okay,
It's my actor's secret.
I appreciate your I guess like your dedication to your craft secrets. Um,
Mhm.
speaking of acting, I guess, or actor, I really like the voices that you used for your characters. Do you have any thoughts on doing like audiobooks, or have you done a lot of readings with like younger listeners as like your demographics to hone your craft, I guess?
Um, I I love doing voices, and I love reading out loud. That's one of my favorite things because reading out loud is only it's basically singing. Like there's no music going on, but when we're talking to each other, we're singing in a very small, narrow range of notes. Um, but yeah, the majority of my reading and acting and stuff is pretty much to myself. I think maybe sometimes to my wife, or every now and then it's been to friends. um, but when I did a tour several years ago for Lucy Fell Down the Mountain, and I could read out loud and act a little for a large audience of like very excited kids. That was pretty awesome. So yeah.
Yeah, like when we had story time at our store regularly, our resident storyteller, Mr. Steve, would do very like he's very talented with voices, and it's always a delight to see kids, giggle at the funny voices that he does. And I was just thinking about how if we had a live audience in front of us, a live audience of kids, they would have really enjoyed hearing you do all those fun voices. So we are winding down to the end of our time. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to send them in. So I guess I will close with, do you have any other projects that you're working on right now or that are coming forth in the next couple of months or next year?
Um, I have some kids' books ideas. Uh, Hopefully, it will not take me 12 years to figure
Oh.
some of those out. But that's kind of what I'm planning next is another book that kind of works in tandem with New in Town and Lucy Fell Down the Mountain and Go to Sleep Monster. These are the kids' books that I've written myself, and hopefully that'll be the next in this set. But yeah, otherwise it's just I like to do a lot of drawing on Instagram and just post drawings as they come to me, and that's basically what I've been concentrating on lately is just keeping my skills honed and drawing and sharing it with people.
Yeah, especially during a time of like self isolation and not socializing enough. You want to, you know, keep in touch with people through social media and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like this is just out of like personal curiosity. Have you received any fan mail, like fan drawings from young readers out there?
I have. I some it doesn't happen as often as it used to because it's people are less likely to mail something and more likely to
Oh,
send
when
something
I
through
say
email.
mail, I mean like also like tagging you on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but I get everything. I get something now and then, and it is amazing whenever I see anything. So I encourage anyone to share something, and I'll try my best to like share your own work in my feed. Um, yeah.
Heard that, folks. If you have if you drew along to today with Kevin, please like tag him on social media and also tag us because I would love to see everyone's projects from
Yeah.
today.
So much
um
dramatic drama.
yes. Okay, so I think that about does it. So let me just put myself back on screen. Okay, well, thank you, Kevin, so much for your fun reading and for showing your awesome drawing skills and also answering so many of my silly questions. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. For those of you who tuned in late, don't worry. A replay of this talk will be available once the broadcast ends. And we'll also re upload this talk onto our YouTube channel in a couple of days. So you can access that as well. Also, we have signed book plates available. If you would like to request one with your purchase of New in Town, just click on the green purchase button. It'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Just make sure to write signed book plate in the order comments when you are checking out your cart, so we know that we should include the book plate with your purchase. But with that said, thank you again, Kevin. It was a pleasure having you. Stay safe, and I hope we can see you soon.
And thank you, Rira.
All
And thank
right.
you, Vromans, very much for hosting.
Yeah, come visit when you're in the area, I guess, once all of this
Oh,
is over.
that
Right.
would be awesome.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.